Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Talking with Boss. I am Parrish Alford, and this is Boss. John Pitts is our sports editor at the Daily Journal. We're going to talk Ole Miss football, SEC football, maybe some other topics for the next 20 minutes, but we're going to hit the Rebels hard. And John, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about, there's been so much focus from an Ole Miss perspective, from a fan's perspective, I should say, on the back end of the schedule, the way the schedule has broken down for Ole Miss. I mean, when those big cardboard schedule posters came out in the summer, everybody gets them out and they think about wins and losses, and maybe they circle some games on there. Everybody saw that all those road games front-loaded, then Texas A&M and LSU, and they've kind of pointed to this as the soft end of the schedule, the back half of the schedule, and we get here, and Ole Miss is indeed stringing together a few wins, and looks like they'll be heavily favored against Troy. But is there danger, do you think, in just identifying it that way? I mean, these guys are so focused on winning 9 games and winning out. They talk about that quite a bit. They've spoken about getting on a roll. Is Troy a team that could come in and really kind of upset the apple cart a little bit?
I think Ole Miss is its own worst enemy on Saturday. I mean, just man to man and talent to talent, they should not have a problem there. I mean, Mississippi State handled them very easily earlier. You know that Troy will probably come in wanting to prove that they're better than that. But anybody that looked at the back end of the schedule in August and circled next week or the next game, the Missouri game, said, "Oh, we got that one." You're wrong. Okay,
Right.
you don't got that one. Okay, you might win, you may beat Missouri, but the evidence is a little scant at the moment. Somebody this week wrote a piece that I read that said, win over Arkansas proves that Ole Miss is ready to play Missouri, and I didn't see that game. I don't know what game they were talking about. To me, and don't take it the wrong way, but Ole Miss went into Arkansas game, looked like to me a team that desperately wanted to get beat if somebody just wanted to take it from them. Okay, but Arkansas didn't know how to take a game from them. Frankly, I thought the crucial moment there, Arkansas driving, maybe the 40, do a little trickeration thing.
First down at the 39.
Right. Mm-hmm. What a disaster. Okay, that I truly believe that if Arkansas goes down and scores there, that Ole Miss may well get beat in that game, get beat by the 13th best team in the league. Okay, so Missouri's much better than that. I don't know. Is Troy a better team than Arkansas? I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure. I know there's some talk in Troy now that despite the fact that they've got a 5-5 record, that their coach is a little bit on a warm seat, which is peculiar.
He's been there 23 years.
But, there are coaches with 7-2 records now that are said to be on the hot seat. Mm-hmm. So it's 2013. I guess you just never quite know. Look, I think that this should be by the middle of the afternoon on Saturday. Everybody else should be back in the Grove having a nice time. But Ole Miss needs to come out, take care of business in the first half, and then let the kids play in the second half and chalk it up. Say we got 7 wins, and then don't start talking about 9 till you get 7. Okay, and that 8th one, if it's going to be against Missouri, that's going to be a tough game.
Well, I'll tell you what, sluggish was the word used to describe the game by Hugh Freeze, and Matt Luke carried that torch farther on Monday, and I think you could see that. Of course, you can spin that a lot of different ways, and they were happy to be able to play sluggish and win an SEC game. But I'll tell you, John, I'm thinking you're going to see sluggish against Troy because I think there's been so much focus on winning out, back end of the schedule, and Freeze told us after the LSU game that, hey, and he kind of revisited a Jackie Sherrill theme here. Back in the day when I was covering Mississippi State, Jackie Sherrill liked to tell us that, hey, you can only get your guys up to play at a really high emotional level just a couple of times a year. Freeze kind of mentioned that after the LSU game, and I agree. And that was a great coaching performance, I thought, to get those guys ready to play. Basically beating LSU with a lot of your second string, because you had so many starters injured and unavailable on defense in that game. So great job there. And it's almost like there's been a little bit of rest now. You get Idaho, then you get an open date. You're sluggish against Arkansas. I think you're going to see a little bit of sluggishness against Troy. Whether or not that costs the Rebels, I don't think it will. But I think you're going to see that, to win out, I think they're going to get to 7. Then I think they realize in order to win out, they're going to have to be at their best to play sharp and focused and emotional football against Missouri when that game comes around on the 23rd. So I think that's where this is headed. But Troy comes in, you know, John, you went to a Troy-level school at Middle Tennessee. I went to a Troy-level school at Northeast Louisiana. Both of those are in the Sun Belt Conference now. And when you get those guys, you get athletes, okay? It's the South. You know, you can find running backs and receivers. You can find skilled people. And when you match a savvy quarterback with those athletes, you still don't have the depth of the BCS level programs, all right? But when you've got a quarterback who knows your offense and knows your system, as Corey Robinson does with Troy, and then you've got some skill guys, you can put up a lot of points. Now, at this level, a lot of times it becomes a question of where do you put your best athletes? Are you putting them on offense or defense? Because that's where the depth shows up. You can't get those outstanding athletes at every position necessarily at this level. But Troy has chosen to put theirs on offense.
Doesn't everybody put them on offense next? Maybe Nick Saban. It seems like at this point that everybody puts their best athletes on offense.
Well, that may be the case, but Saban is still held up as the guy that everyone wants to emulate. You know, he's still the process guy and the national champion. So maybe they should go back to that. Maybe everybody should just trash the spread offense and the up-tempo offense and run some power I and put all your athletes on defense.
Not going to happen.
All right. But Troy right now has that savvy quarterback. You know, they have some playmakers on offense, and they're scoring points. And, you know, and their sample size here for BCS level competition this year isn't that large.
No.
It's Mississippi State, which really is the only team to handle Troy on both sides of the ball, a 62-7 win. Troy has scored at least 31 points in every other game. Their only other BCS level game coming against Duke, a 38-31 Duke win several weeks ago. So, you know, I think you're going to see a team coming in that doesn't have that depth. Ole Miss should be able to be in position, be pretty secure in the fourth quarter. If the Rebels highlight their differences, which should be in the trenches, you know, should be along those lines. You know, if they run the ball and run some clock there, I think they'll be pretty safe with this game in the second half. I don't know that it's going to be as early as some people might want it to be.
Get physical. I think that's the key, particularly given the depth situation. Of course, Ole Miss is sort of getting its depth back online, so this should be an excellent opportunity to rotate a lot of guys in and out and get some work and get the kinks out against what's going to be a tough game against Missouri.
Wanted to talk to you about some other SEC games. John, Missouri has the week off, okay, so they're getting healthier now, and you know they'll come into Oxford a little bit rested, a little bit more healed than they have been. In the SEC this weekend, Georgia at Auburn. Auburn has a chance to be 10-1 after this game. 10-1, 6-1 in the SEC. Georgia is not the team that they were at the beginning. They've had their health issues. They're getting a little stronger, I think, getting some people back. But what do you make of this Auburn team, John, and are they a threat to Nick Saban and Alabama in the Iron Bowl?
It's a great turnaround. I don't know that they're a threat against Alabama because the last 2 weeks, as dominant as they've been, they haven't thrown the ball. And you've got to figure Georgia has to come in wanting to make them throw the ball. Alabama, I believe, the way they're set up, will say, you want to come in and run the ball against us? Great. That's fantastic. We welcome the opportunity for you to run the ball against us because we feel like our defense is set up for that. If you're not going to be throwing against our cornerbacks, super. We encourage that. You got to force them, I'd say, to throw. You want Marshall to throw the ball 25 times. If you can make him throw the ball 25 times, there's a fairly good probability that a couple of those balls are going to wind up in the wrong hands, in your hand.
Right. I tell you what, it's been pretty impressive what Auburn has done in the run game. But when you look at Nick Marshall, you're not seeing Johnny Manziel from last year. That's not what you're seeing. Even last year, Johnny Manziel was a passer and a runner. I mean, this is like a poor man's Randall Mackey. You know, he's running a great rushing offense, but I have to believe that's not set up well for Auburn for next year.
Right.
When coaches have had a year to look at Auburn, a year to think about it and scheme, you know, they only threw the ball 9 times against Arkansas.
Amazing.
Hey, it's great work if you can get it. You know, if you can run the ball that many times and just dominate an opponent to that level, that's fine. Keeps the clock moving. I'm for that.
They got a mess of running backs. There's no question
Yeah.
about it. But like I say, I think get to this time of year and I look at who Auburn has at quarterback and who Georgia has at quarterback, and I just tend to say, okay, I'm going to go with the veteran quarterback.
All right, so you go with Georgia in this game.
I would,
I think
yeah.
Georgia's getting stronger.
Yeah.
What about Florida, man? Florida losing at home to Vanderbilt like that. You know, I know that Florida has had their injuries also, but I'm just stunned at the inefficiency, the lack of any kind of consistent production on offense from this team that is in the state of Florida, because we
Right.
know all the players that are in Florida. Probably
Right.
know the players that are on that roster.
Right. It's a complete catastrophic coaching breakdown, and it's probably going to cost Muschamp his job. If this team goes out, they've got one goofy game left, don't they? Don't they
Georgia
play?
Southern. Yeah,
Is it
coming up.
Is it Georgia Southern?
They go South Carolina this week,
Yeah.
at South Carolina, then Georgia Southern and
Well,
Florida State.
so they win that game, but they're not going to win any other games, and they're not going to go bowling. It's just a disaster. It looks like to me that a change may be in the works there.
Well, and I just think about how things change in the profession. It wasn't that long ago that Will Muschamp was coaching waiting at Texas.
Right.
So it's really a different day there. Kentucky at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt with a chance to get bowl eligible here. Commodores go in 5-4. There was a time, John, when I watched Kentucky on TV a few times and thought, well, this team is playing hard for Mark Stoops, and they were doing some good things on defense. I go back to watching part of that Louisville game earlier this year, but yeah, this is just not a very good Kentucky team. They've had some injuries too. You know, they weren't at full strength when they were in start.
And their roster was terrible to begin with. But now he's recruiting. All right, a couple of years from now, they will be to be reckoned with. But right now, no, they're no good.
What do you think about James Franklin? Obviously, as long as he's in Vanderbilt and as long as he's getting the Commodores bowl eligible, his name is going to come up for jobs.
Well,
so how long does James Franklin need to stay at Vanderbilt? Is he a lifer, or does he need to get these guys in a bowl game this year and let people point to the improvement they made down the stretch and then get out?
He's my winner of the week in Monday's paper. I said, well, his agent was the winner of the week because of the phone calls that he most surely must be fielding at this point. You'd think this would be it. You would think if he wants to go someplace that he gets this team from a bad start, okay, but another good finish. They got Tennessee to play. Now, that's going to be in Knoxville. And then they play Wake Forest to close, and Wake Forest is no good. So you could be looking potentially at another 8-win regular season. You'd think he would strike if he's going to strike at that point.
Yeah, and you know, Vanderbilt is also benefiting right now from being in the Eastern Division. Okay,
Right.
That's helping them down the stretch here. They're also helped by the unusual seasons in terms of injuries that Georgia and Florida are having. But if you're Vanderbilt and you put Georgia and Florida on your resume, that's still a pretty good season. If you get 8 wins.
Never done, and I misspoke. They had not won at Florida since 1945, but they'd never beaten Georgia and Florida in the same year, apparently.
Yeah, and so at the end of the year, when people are looking at James Franklin's resume, they're not really going to say, yeah, but Georgia and Florida were down. You have to catch lightning in a bottle. Vanderbilt's been able to do that. And Vanderbilt, I thought, was a pretty good team going into the season, or would be, with all of the experience that they had returning. Then that very exciting game with Ole Miss on opening night. And how different might the Rebels season look right now had they not gotten the 75-yard run from Jeff Scott to kind of help put that game away, put them back on top in that opener against Vanderbilt. So Vanderbilt, after that game, really, just kind of some ugly games, really struggling with a UMass team that isn't very good. But they're playing at a different level right now.
Well, here's a team that could be talking about winning 9 games, but they're not. if you'll notice. I don't see any bulletin board quotes out of Vanderbilt kids about how they're aiming to win 9 games. They seem to be staying on task. So, they actually have a pretty good path there. A lot of it depends on what they can do in Knoxville, but Knoxville's not the valley of death like it was in years past. And then they're not going to get a real good bowl slot. I mean, if Tennessee doesn't make it to the Liberty Bowl, it really doesn't look like Tennessee's going bowling. Vanderbilt might wind up at the Liberty Bowl possibly, and against a lower tier opponent, they really could close in a rush.
We saw Vanderbilt flounder for years, John, while we saw other schools of similar athletic pedigrees, Northwestern, Stanford, we saw them have success in football. Can James Franklin pass the torch in Vanderbilt with apparently a renewed commitment from its administration? Can the next guy come in and keep Vanderbilt competitive?
It may not be the next guy. It might be the guy after that. I look at a program that floundered like Buffalo, and then a coach came in and turned Buffalo around some, and he left. They crashed again, but now they're back. So it might not be the guy after Franklin. It might have to be the guy after that. But they can be competitive, especially in the East, moving forward.
Wanted to ask you, John, getting out of the SEC a little bit, you wrote in a column about this a couple of weeks ago, the Southern Miss debacle. I mean, how did you get there? Who is responsible? How do you fix it?
Well, 3 coaches in 3 years is always a danger sign. And the next best example of that I can think of is probably, was it Tennessee that had at some point 3 coaches in 3 years? And that's just a disaster. Larry Fedora was there and did get them to a magical 11-win season, but that very year their recruiting fell off. They had maybe the 100th best recruiting class in the country that year, when they'd had a string of years when maybe they were in the 30th or 40th percentiles on that. I think that hiring Ellis Johnson was a horrible mistake. Good defensive coach. He's at Auburn now, right? A great coordinator, not a head coach. It was a thematic and tonal mistake. They came in and tore up whatever recruiting had been done, the recruiting to a different style. Now you shift gears yet again and go get another youngish offensive coordinator from Oklahoma State. So it's a very schizophrenic move that you made through in terms of what your hiring was. And I think it has probably messed up their recruiting base. It probably has deeply affected their recruiting relationships that could have been built down south of Jackson. Southern Miss has never routinely done any recruiting up here, and it's always been a puzzle to me. But they don't try to extend their sense of force much up here in football. And this is a league that they're in now that's somewhat diminished by the appearance of new teams and the departure of some better teams, and yet they can't win a game. Literally can't buy a game.
Can't win their out-of-conference games. You know what? I look back, I think obviously this all starts with Larry Fedora. I mean, he left the program depleted of talent. Recruiting fell off. He got out at a good time, okay? Ellis Johnson was not a good fit. He may get the biggest pass out of all of these 3 coaches, John. I look and I want to say, there's a part of me that looks at Todd Monken and says, well, he came into a bad situation. He did, but he knew that, and it's his team, and whatever team you agree to coach, you have to improve, and they just don't seem to be getting better.
Well, it's this thing of we've got to hang in there till we can get the kids to run the system that we want to run. And I hate that, okay? I think, yeah, that's fine for next year. But this year, you've got to run a system that works for the kids that you have. Right now, Southern Miss, maybe the Mullins is their quarterback. A couple of weeks ago, the Hattiesburg guy tweeted that Southern Miss had 4 quarterbacks on the roster for a particular game, and I said, well, put them all 4 in the game. All right, try something, do something, because this is not working. And frankly, because of the failures on offense, their defense is just they are whipped dogs.
And that used to be what they hung their hat on,
based on the results, the shockingly lopsided scores of games against teams in which they are not shockingly worse than. But now if you ask the computers will tell you that a good SWAC team would beat Southern Miss, that Jackson State would beat Southern Miss on a neutral field, and that is thoroughly unacceptable. I don't know, the Southern Miss administration is preaching patience, but you can certainly see where that could fall on deaf ears as the losing goes on and on.
John, good stuff. We'll catch up with you next week.
All right, look forward to it.